Oh, all right. Hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So a couple of quick things before we dive into this video proper. First thing being, so we'll just mention this just in case, but for anyone that does follow me on Twitter, if you're wondering what happened, if you noticed I disappeared the last little while, just a quick FYI, I kind of decided to take a break from there. Right now, I'm thinking until the start of May. That's it's kind of in flux. Could change based on whims and all that. But yeah, I decided to take a small break from Twitter for kind of two kind of big reasons. One number one, I think. So for those of you that don't know, I work in the accounting field, and I live in Canada. And April 30th is our tax filing deadline. So because of that, late February towards like April tends to be the busiest part of my year work wise. So I've been putting in a lot of overtime these last couple of weeks, as we're trying to catch up with all the workload before the deadline hits because we have to get stuff filed, everything, yeah, everything gathered together and all that. So because of that, I've just haven't had the energy for literally anything, and scrolling like doom scrolling Twitter kind of just makes me super drained and tired, which kind of doesn't really help around this time. So that's one. That's the first big reason to decide to take a break. The second being that March is usually just a bad month for me mental health wise. And for the longest time, like I couldn't figure out why until I was doing some therapy sessions last year, and my therapist kind of told me something that kind of like set off a light bulb moment, where he said that your body basically like remembers past trauma that you've gone through, suffered, whatever, and so whenever the anniversary of that moment happens again, like when it comes back around, your body kind of goes into like survival mode to protect you from like the rush of emotions and everything, like the welling of feelings that can bring up. And so, small trigger warning for talking about pet death. If anyone wants to skip ahead like a minute or so, but I lost my dog Toby 2 years ago now, during March, and he was only around like 5 years old when he died. So, sorry, I'm just getting all emotional here, but he was a major part of my life for like when I was going through some really rough times. So I still haven't completely gotten over losing him like that. And then this has been kind of exacerbated with, because I was also at a really shit job during that time. And so I had, some issues from there that also happened around the same time. So kind of came all crashing in on me during March. I think this year's just been kind of worse because of the pandemic and everything else. So felt like I needed to take a break so that my mental health didn't deteriorate even further than it did. Yeah, so that's kind of the TLDR of why I haven't been around or active on Twitter. I've like taken the app off my phone, locked it on my desktop, so I'm not even like tempted to try and check it out. But yeah, other than that, like I mentioned, the past few videos, still technically on hiatus from YouTube content until at least the second week of May, once things settle down. But I kind of made an exception for this. Decided I'll do a quick One Piece review video because it's been kind of amazing seeing the fandom's reaction to this latest shit show of a chapter. And I figured, because I've been watching a lot of Drizz's videos and I like the analysis and stuff he's been doing, and like a lot of what he says are also similar thoughts that I've had. So I've kind of figured I'd put my own 2 cents out there as well. And I figured this would kind of be a good way to kind of de-stress and unwind from just focusing on work all the time, stuff like that. So yeah, first I was gonna also live stream uh, uh, But I figured the easiest thing to do this time around, at least, would just be keep it casual, pre-record, and then put it up. I am considering or looking at going back to doing the weekly reaction review stuff. Just because I've been watching a lot of Drizit's videos lately when he's been doing that. And he's been kind of doing the same analysis, and a lot of his thoughts have been kind of the same as mine regarding the series recently. So that's kind of inspired me to kind of jump back into doing it because of, my kind of appreciation for storytelling, critical analysis in general. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Because right now I'm kind of avoiding Twitter, so if you watch for my notifications there, you're probably not going to see it for the next little while I'm kind of doing this off and on. So easiest way to do is sub to the channel. That way you'll get a notification when I go live. If I'm going to do it this Sunday, it's probably going to happen around 11 a.m. MST, which I think Mountain Standard Time, which is when I usually used to do in the past. So yeah, for this weekend, look for it then. If I'm going to do it, I'll try my best to get her out around then. If I can't, maybe I'll do like a quick channel update video or something to mention if it's going ahead or not. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Like I said, I feel like it's a good way for me to just unwind, talk to some people and not have to think about work 24/7. So yeah, if you're down for that, please do, watch for it. Then join the chat whenever it does go live. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, all right. Before we dive into more of the video proper, quick digression. Where I want to shout out two other YouTube manga anime channels that I think you should give a sub and a follow to. So if you do like critical analysis of anime, manga, or just leftist politics in general, or the same kind of content that I do, except with one leaning more towards analysis than kind of read through reaction stuff, then please do give Critical Weeb Theory a sub and a follow, because they're honestly doing the amazing work and creating the kind of content that I aspire to one day also create with my own channel with the analyses I'm going to eventually try undertaking. Because I was listening to their latest episode of on their channel a week ago, I want to say now, where they're talking about My Hero Academia with another good friend of mine, the Black Manga Critic, whom you should also sub to and follow, because he's honestly an amazing guy, really good friend, huge anime and manga fan. He's got thoughtful analyses, just has a super lot of fun on his channel. So go give him a sub and a follow as well. I'll have both links, description and a link to their channels in the description below, as well as a link to their Twitter profiles as well, so you can follow them on all the platforms. But yeah, really got to say that it's really hard for me personally to find content creators on videos on YouTube, especially with anime and manga, that I really like and enjoy, because a lot of what gets recommended to me is like pandering shit, where creators are trying to get as many views as possible, and so they kind of like gear their content towards that. But it was really, really refreshing seeing, Critical Weeb Theory, listening to their latest episode, and kind of the engaging and thoughtful conversations they're having regarding, My Hero Academia and heroics and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. Highly recommend listening to that episode. Highly recommend giving them a sub and a listen and a follow. But yeah, I just want to get into that before we get too deep into this video. With all that out of the way, now let's get into the actual content proper and talk about One Piece chapter 1008. Gonna sip some bourbon from my little fancy continental glass here. Oh, that's good. So, oh man, that's such good. Elephant in the room out of the way first. To absolutely no one's surprise, and to One Piece stand's relief, and their One Piece stands relief. Turns out it was not the real Kozuki Oden. I don't think anyone really expected it to be, although I would have I would have had such a good laugh if it turned out to be the case, but well, I can't see them having a meltdown over it. But yeah, as most people predicted, it was the most obvious choice. It turned out to be a Kanjuro ink clone. Again, no one's surprised. Kanjuro's still alive and kicking, fucking with the scabbards, getting his jollies off doing that. That's whatever it is. But that said, though, the most amazing thing about this chapter is how deluded a vast majority of the One Piece fans are. Because in a chapter where it's revealed that a death fake out was indeed a fake out, Oda follows it up with another death fake out. With Ashura, sacrificing himself to fight off the Oden clone. And yet so many fans are out here talking about Ashura's sacrifice and how this time Oda's going to commit to killing off a character and how they expect at least some of the scabbards to die by the end of the arc. And it's like, really? Like, you all really have no issue with how dumb this man thinks you are, that he continually puts in these obvious ass fake outs as cliffhangers at the end of his chapters, right? And you keep coming back to me like, oh, he's really going to commit to it this time, even when he kind of just fucking like gives you the finger and says, ha, I was just screwing with you, right? And it's even funnier because I'm seeing so many white YouTubers going, oh, Kanjuro being dead didn't serve the story, but, Ashura's death would. Like, the man is a one-dimensional caricature that's gotten absolutely no development up to this point. So I don't know where they're kind of like coming up with these headcanon ideas of like, oh, his death is so meaningful and means so much. Like, nah, but it's a digression I don't want to get into. But because I kind of want to speak about death in this is like, wow, and another non-surprise, as it turns out, not Conjure's not the only one, because it turns out Orochi isn't dead either. And I'll say at least this one was at least marginally more forgivable, because at least it ties into his fruit powers, kind of like an expectation literally everyone had. And Oda's need for drama aside, like, yeah, no one I think really bought into the idea that Orochi was dead. And story-wise, it did make more sense for Orochi to come back at some point, given that so far he's more the actual antagonist of this arc than Kanjuro was. So him being offed with such little fanfare would kind of dampen it a little bit. But all that said, like, honestly, the only reason all these stupid fake outs are so annoying is because of how many of them Oda has done post time skip. Now, initially when I was writing up like a mini script, like review thoughts, notes for this video, I was going to do like a deep dive into talking about like death and how it's handled in the story as a storytelling mechanic, especially with the piss poor way that Oda handles it. But as I was like gathering thoughts and like getting ready to write them up, I figured it would derail the video too much from the main point and it'd be like too much of a digression and be better saved for its own separate musings or analysis video. So that's what I'll do eventually, because again, just kind of brief digression, like when I first applied to the One Piece podcast years ago, the first editorial, like the first piece I ever wrote that actually got me the position with them was one about death in the series. And I've always meant to kind of go back to that and do an updated analysis now that I'm more knowledgeable about certain topics and storytelling and analysis and all that, and I've never gotten around to it. So I'm just going to add that kind of onto my big pile of stuff that I have to do. But yeah. But to do like a bit of a TLDR on like what my overall thoughts are, like I see a lot of times whenever this like people criticize Oda for having these death fake outs, a lot of people try to defend it by saying like, oh, years ago, Oda did that interview where he talked about how his grandmother told him not to toss around words like kill or die, etc. Because like words are powerful and they have, they can impact someone uh, in unforeseen ways. You shouldn't treat death so lightly in your series. And they like to use that to try to justify him not killing the characters in the series. And apart from the hypocrisy with regards to all of that, with what he says and does. No, that's not the only thing. The other thing I forgot to mention was like also when he did that same thing like interview and he said like, oh, I don't like killing the villains because it's more impactful if Luffy just defeats them and they get to see their dreams crushed because that's a fate worse than death. Like apart from the hypocrisy of all that crap that he tosses out, my big issue really like that's not the issue I have with his writing, because let's be clear, like Oda doesn't have a problem with including death in his series, as flashbacks are full of it, and he also kind of continually uses it as a tactic to elicit an emotional response. Like it's a go-to storytelling tactic for him to elicit an emotional response in the reader. But lately he's been kind of immediately undercutting it and cheapening kind of the associated storytelling costs of it, and the meaning of death in his stories. And the thing is, like, if he really had an issue with it, as he and his stands claim, if he was really trying to treat it respectfully, because of his grandmother's memory, whatever, then he wouldn't keep continually reusing it as like a cheap storytelling mechanic. But the fact that he does means he understands, why it's an effective kind of tool in any storyteller's arsenal, and why he continually does, these boy who cried wolf fake outs, and then keeps trying to go like the next time, like, oh, this time I mean it, this time you better watch out, you don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people, like, immediately go to the dumb arguments of, like, oh, you mean you just want the series to be full of death like Game of Thrones? And it's like, yeah, you don't need, to have death in your story for it to be emotionally meaningful or impactful, or for stakes and consequences to exist to be meaningful and impactful. But let's be clear that that's not what fans are criticizing Oda for. And it's kind of disingenuous that, the stands keep trying to steer the conversation towards that implication. Because the arguments are like, oh, you want the characters to just drop dead and all that, annoy the hell out of me, because there is no kind of nuance to those discussions. But like I said, I will do a thorough analysis of that at some point, because I think it does deserve kind of a deep dive into it to kind of explore the nuances and complexities of it. But I just wanted to kind of mention and put it out there, because honestly, that more than anything, like even knowing it was coming at some point, even knowing it was a possibility, it still annoyed the hell out of me seeing it again, and seeing how like blasé Oda was about it, and like the way he's framed it and everything else. But like I said, I'll talk about that in depth at a future date, but definitely the weakest part of the chapter. So I'll touch on a few of the other kind of like minor plot point things before we get into the thing, any bigger like theory speculation stuff. So the Inu Jack Norochi scene. Bold assertion here. I know it's nothing new with me. I don't, because everyone's kind of saying like, oh, we're getting to the climax, we're getting 1v1s. Oh, Oda's rushing towards it. Despite everyone thinking we're getting final matchups and it's the climax, I still think that Oda is stalling and that he's separating everyone out, like kind of having them like, run around to different parts of Onigashima, so that when it finally does get destroyed, that they're all going to be scattered to different parts of Wano. And I'll fully admit, I know this is kind of an out there theory, given that, Oda's pacing has been kind of atrocious with how quickly he's been kind of rushing through things lately. And, his repeated commitment to his 5-year timeline for ending his series. So I know all of that makes it kind of a bold claim theory to put out there. But I'll say I have a couple of reasons why I think that's the case. Biggest one being Orochi's triumphant return, and his grand plan of burning Onigashima to the ground, or at least the headquarters. Alone, I wouldn't give it any weight. Like, alright, yeah, it's setting fire. How effectual is that actually going to be? But we've also been kind of seeing hints throughout the last few chapters, once, the fighting got underway, that the building is starting to collapse from the clash on the roof. You see debris raining down on the gifters inside. And, you can, like, hear the rumbling and everything from there. And you've also got, like, the damage from the various skirmishes where it's ulti headbutting shit, bombs going off, shit like that. So structurally, I feel like, there's been enough damage done to the structure that a blow could possibly take it down. And given that Oda did this on Whole Cake, like, I wouldn't put it past him to do it again on Wano as another kind of plot device. But that's one point. The next one is, again, kind of the big speculative one. I know a majority of fans expect Big Mom and Kaido to be both taken down on Wano. I'm going to be the lone dissenter saying that only Kaido is going down on Wano, and Big Mom is still going to fall into Elbaf, where her story arc is going to conclude. The line is, especially with the line at the end where Law saying, like, to split them up. Oh, they're too powerful together, we can't damage them. I think that lends credence to my idea that they're going to get Big Mom out of the way, especially given how badly Oda's handled her in the past. I wouldn't put it past him to, again, trash Big Mom for the sake of the story. So my guess is either Big Mom is either going to get washed into the ocean, either she's going to fall in, trip. I'm still kind of holding on to the idea that Zoro's going to split the island in half, and Big Mom's going to drop into the ocean by accident, as she's wont to do. And then she'll wash into the ocean, and then end up back with her kids at the bottom of the waterfall. Or B, she's going to fall down, I don't know, through maybe the hole in the roof on top of Onigashima, bash her head again, end up as Lowland, and help out the Alliance. Either way, expect her to be out of commission. I don't think she's going to be a major part of this battle at any point going forward. And the third reason is a lot more speculative, and it's kind of based on musings I've had watching other YouTubers review reaction stuff. And that's, a lot of people have been wondering why Dogstorm is facing Jack alone and not with Cat Viper, given that they're basically been a duo up to this point. So it seems kind of odd to, separate them at this point, especially given that they both have history and beef with Jack. So it was a good point. And, given that Ashura's apparently down for the count now, and Dogstorm's supposed, hanging back as well while the other samurai rushing towards Momo, I feel like it's setting up for each scabbard to slowly start getting paired off with different enemies, or get, dropped into different conflicts along the way as they head for Momo, with only Kinemon potentially actually getting to him, again, given like the whole father-son dynamic and bond they've had since Punk Hazard, so that they can kind of stay together, and they'll end up on like the different areas of Wano. So that's my guess. Again, I know it's kind of out there, it isn't really based on anything, but tossing it out there for posterity. I'll also kind of address the things, say like, yeah, could the battle end here? Sure. This is just my take, again, based on what I feel like would be the best storytelling, based on my analysis and stuff. honestly, I'm not going to bother speculating like too deeply on the ins and outs of what could happen, how it could happen, all that stuff. Uh, Apart from I'll do a bit more theorizing on things, but I'm not going to get into like trying to like hash out different probabilities of things happening. But like I said, posterity. And I should mention, so we did get confirmation here on something I've semi speculated on before with my theories. Uh, and I don't think I mentioned this in my last review. I meant to bring it up in my last video. And initially I was going to link it to my editorials, but unfortunately, the One Piece podcast completely scrubbed them from their site. So I'll have to find a way to like put them back up on my own site at some point. But yeah. But like these confirmation thing that I got was Momo talking about his emotions, more specifically, his powerful evocative emotions and how it affects his devil fruit transformation. Because fans have been speculating, what exactly makes Vegapunk's devil fruit a failure since Momo can transform, back and forth from a dragon without any visible problems. He's not like the gifters where he can only transform, like body parts or anything like that. And it doesn't seem like, he's missing any powers or anything, even though he's only used, the cloud one so far. And so my theory has always been, kind of that the missing link is the soul aspect of it. The devil fruit and the link to the soul. I'll try and find an editorial thread I wrote about and link it in the description, because I don't want to go too in depth into it. So if anyone's curious, you can go look at that thread where I kind of went really into it. But yeah, it's something I'm keeping an eye on to see how it develops, because that intrigues me a lot. Especially because, again, like in this, I'm not sure if it was an editorial in the thread I wrote, but I did, like in those ones, I did notice like Chopper talks about how carnivorous zoans are more bloodthirsty than, regular zoans. And that kind of put me into the idea of like this idea of like a bleeding effect between, the animal and the human, like zone powers kind of transferring back and forth. Like I said, it'll be in the thread. Maybe I'll do something in depth once we get like a concrete answer at some point. But yeah, don't want to digress too much, but keeping an eye on it because that's interesting. We also get a reminder about his hockey and the voice of all things. Don't really give a shit about that. It's not really super majorly relevant, except now that Shinobu knows that he has a bit, so I guess that's the only reason for it there. God. Yamato's Oden shtick is getting exponentially more annoying now with fucking Oda doing that stupid, oh man, I'm Oden, so I guess I should go do this, because, I'm literally Kozuki Oden. Like, he's building up to some stupid ass garbage, and the faster he gets to it, the better, rather than just like dragging it out so goddamn much, where it's just like, haven't revealed anything else about Yamato, so I guess this has to pass for a personality now. Like, I'm just getting like, I'm starting to hate Yamato more than I'm liking him at this point. And so, with all that out of the way, come to the biggest disappointment of the chapter, beyond all even the death stuff, and that's Kaido's hybrid form, or at least his assumed hybrid form. But I'll get into that in depth in a little bit. But I can honestly say, after seeing like, the various fan arts, everything else on Twitter, like all the, I don't want to say hype, because I don't know, the fans will be like, oh, expectations, oh. No, but like, it was not worth Oda teasing a silhouette, making us wait weeks, and then giving us this. Like, the most underwhelming transformation where it's like, alright, he grew a couple of extra horns, sprouted a tail, he's got some claws, he's got some scales, which, since he had the tattoo already, don't really do like anything visually striking for his design. And like, it just looked incomplete to me. Like, it didn't look like a completed hybrid form. And I saw a lot of fans kind of comparing it to Lucci's hybrid and saying it's basically the same as Lucci's hybrid form. Like, oh, what are you guys complaining about? And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of similar. I was expecting more of a muzzle on his face. Like his face is like a little bit too flat, I think, is part of at least what makes it so underwhelming. But apart from that, the reason I kind of am thinking like this cannot be the complete hybrid. There's something missing, apart from my expectations, like hopes for awakening, like getting confirmation that Kaido and his crew are awakened Zoan users. Was I looked at some of the other hybrids we've seen, specifically Page 1 and X Drake, which I think are the only two of the Flying Six we've actually seen as like actual hybrids. And they look like vastly different to Kaido. Like they look like, there are the similarities. Like, yeah, they got the scales, the claws, and everything. Like I said, the muzzle look kind of gives them more of a hybrid one than Kaido's does. But the other one that I looked at was also kind of like the odd standout, apart from, Black Maria, who's there's still going to be something about Black Maria's hybrid form. But the other weird one was Ulti's hybrid form, which is the one that kind of gave me pause. And that's why I kind of said, this is Kaido's assumed hybrid form. Because Ulti's hybrid was weird because it looked very selective when she was transformed. I have to admit that there's a possibility that this could just be because Oda's like, oh, I want her to stay sexy as a hybrid, so that's why I only had her transform her extremities, so you could still have boobs in her hourglass figure and everything like that. I wouldn't put it past Oda for having done that, but if you look at Ulti's hybrid form, it looks like she's only partially transformed. Her extremities are transformed, like her forearm to her hands have been transformed to claws. Same with her legs, where it's from like a little bit above the knee down is transformed to the legs. Her face, she's got the little bit of the little skull cap. She's got the horns coming out. But her face still looks like mostly human, and her midsection is still completely human. And again, like this is something I've speculated on before. I'm not sure if I've talked about it on the videos before, but I've talked about it on my Twitter specifically. But I've talked about how the possibility that Zoans who have mastered their devil fruit powers might be able to selectively transform their body parts. I think Marco's the prime example of this because I don't think as of yet we've also seen any kind of hybrid form from him. Again, this could be a weird kind of thing. I have to acknowledge the possibility that mythical zones just operate differently. You have a different set of rules for whatever reason Oda decided. But I don't think that's the case. But Marco's kind of the prime example where we've seen him transform his arms and his legs into, wings and the Phoenix claws so he can fight better. Or he'll go in, his full Zoan form so he can kind of do his aerial reconnaissance, whatever. But I don't think we've actually seen a hybrid form similar to, again, like Morgan's, we've confirmed is an Albatross user who's pretty much also confirmed to be in his hybrid form. We haven't really seen anything like that from Marco either. And I've always been of the mind, this might be a prerequisite for awakening your powers, is you have to have mastered your devil fruit. And again, like I said before, like I've theorized longest time that Oda held off on showing Kaido and Ko's hybrid form to conceal the fact that they're awakened devil fruit users. And I was a little bit disappointed this seems to refute that because of Kaido's form not looking anything like the impelled down awakened jailer beasts. Again, awakened jailer beasts, those look more like what I expect a hybrid form to look like. And so Kaido's, again, like something, that's why I'm seeing like Kaido's felt incomplete. That would kind of, and to me, that would explain again why you see him where his torso looks pretty much the same. I know X Drake and Page 1 are the same as well, and have the skin there. And you've only seen like the claws and everything else and just kind of like the minor scale things and the fangs is because it's a partial transformation. So I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. And part of the reason why I'm still of the mind that these aren't final matchups and that we're going to see them get scattered throughout the islands, is that the rest of the Flying Six and King and Queen haven't transformed into their hybrid forms yet. Again, acknowledge fully that Oda could be teasing it like he did with Kaido. He's dragging it out to try to, make the readers, like, to borrow a page from the Black Manga Critic, he's trying to do the Scooby Snack thing, where he's trying to tease the readers and he's trying to get their appetite up for when he does eventually reveal it, so he'll be, like, all super excited and into it. But the biggest outlier mystery with regards to that is Jack, in my opinion, because to me it doesn't make sense as to why he hasn't transformed into his hybrid form, given that it's almost guaranteed an acknowledgement that being in your hybrid form does give you a combat advantage. Like, that's the peak form for, where you get the most bang for your buck, basically. Especially, when Inu and Neko went Sulong when they're on the roof and they're fighting him together. Jack was still fighting them in his mammoth form, which I don't think he would have chosen because, this is the optimal form for me to fight in, or I can handle them with just this form. I don't think that he would have held back, especially given that he did end up getting defeated by them, and he's apologizing and kind of being like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough. It didn't feel like he gave it his all before he went down, and so if he didn't go into his hybrid, if he did go into his hybrid, why would he have transformed back? Like, there's a disconnect there that I think deserves an explanation. I'm not going to say need because I know how that goes. If every time I say need, something needs to happen in the series. So that's kind of the weird outlier that kind of makes me think there's something with this. And this again ties into something else that a lot of people have been speculating, talking about tangentially, which is the current Jack would not have been around 20 years ago when Kaido first took over Wano, because he's 28 right now. So 20 years ago, he would have only been 8 years old. He would have been a literal child. It's not really possible that he would have been in Kaido's crew at that point as one of his headliners. So a lot of people are speculating on who the potential previous holder of that title could have been. Yada, yada, yada. But the reason I say it's tangentially related to my thoughts is I wonder if Jack, being the potentially the least experienced of the trio, means he either, if he has awakened his Zoan form, like if he does have an awakened form, he doesn't have control over it yet, and that's why he avoids going into it, or he hasn't unlocked it yet, again, because he's too inexperienced. And in this battle, he finally will, because he'll be pushed to his absolute final limit, because we've seen that, he got beaten up really badly by Inu and Neko on the roof. Again, in this fight, he kind of reiterates with Inu that, he's kind of on his lap, both of them kind of on their last legs. So it'd be interesting to see if that's what finally forced him to kind of go that next step in this battle. And then kind of the last two little niggly things before I kind of wrap this up. Again, something I wrote my editorial years ago and got confirmed on one of the later chapters by CP0. Kaido was held on Punk Hazard, presumably, and experimented on, which is why, years ago, I speculated that, the artificial island that he was building with, the fake trees and the metal trees, the Caribou washed up on the cover story, that island looked a lot like Punk Hazard did before Caesar set off that giant explosion that kind of changed the landscape. And then, with what happened with the Jailer Beast becoming permanently awakened, I speculated might be related to experiments Vegapunk conducted on them as he's experimenting with Kaido, experimenting with, the whole bloodline elements thing, experimenting with awakening. Now, to date, we haven't seen, what happens when another Zoan user eats Chopper's Rumble Ball. And again, that's something I'm kind of holding out to see if that's going to be something that gets put into play, because it would be a massively missed opportunity for that to not be explored in an arc with Zoan Devil Fruit users as the enemy front and center, and kind of exploring, the possibilities of Zoan Devil Fruits. So, Queen mass producing Rumble Balls for Kaido's crew would be an interesting hiccup, especially because we know that he knows Judge somehow. I assume he was on that scientific team with Vegapunk at some point. Given the fact he likes to tinker and experiment, I can't discount the possibility. I can't discount how potentially interesting it'd be to see, him messing with the Rumble Ball. Especially now that Chopper finally went into his monster point, bitch slapped Queen. It would be interesting to see how Queen reacts to his monster form, like the possibilities and things that brings up. But a lot of digression, but like I said, a lot of story possibilities for what could happen. We'll have to see what direction Oda takes it. Like I said, the way he's rushing it, these might all just end up being, storytelling plot points that he wanted to explore that get left on the cutting room floor because he doesn't have enough time or whatever. So we'll see what happens with that. And one last niggly little thing to talk about that I didn't like particularly before I wrap this up, and that's Kaido's speech about Luffy's eyes and being like, nod to his seemingly unbreakable spirit. Luffy always surmounts insurmountable odds. He's the underdog and everything. It didn't really land because honestly, Luffy hasn't really gone through anything this arc that was really tested him or pushed him to his limits. He got one-shotted by Kaido. It was the best moment of Wano thus far, in my opinion. And it was a really good moment. But that wasn't really an insurmountable challenge given how used to being defeated or knocked down more than once he is, with prior throwdowns, conflicts he's had with villains. Especially given how much Oda played up the whole Kaido likes breaking people's spirits, and all the Flying Six talking about you're going to serve Kaido because he's going to break you and you'll see how he's the most powerful and all that. We haven't really seen much torture or breaking of spirits or anything like that, or even there hasn't been a real challenge throughout any of this arc. And the way that Oda's trying to frame it, make it read as he has admiration for Luffy for not, backing down and rising to the challenge. It's most of what he's gone through in Wano is kind of stumbling over a pebble or kicking your toe on a Lego, and it's just It's yeah, it hurts and it sucks a little bit, but it's not oh my god, oh no, how am I going to overcome this challenge? To me, it feels Oda realized he smushed too much filler into this arc. He's got all these hanging plot threads and themes that he hasn't fully developed. And so he keeps trying to force them into the narrative and be do you get what I'm trying to go for? Do you understand what I'm saying? Huh? Do you get it yet? And it doesn't work because he hasn't built up, a solid foundation for it. So use the Three Pigs analogy because that's the only one my tired brain can come up with. It's he's built this shoddy ass house of straw, and the smallest breath will knock it down because that's how shaky the foundation for a lot of the emotional stuff he's trying to push, emotional storytelling he's trying to push through. And I feel honestly Wano really is the prime example of why he needs to take a month or so off between arcs to plan better and flesh out the storyline a little bit more and tighten it, and B, he really needs to get editors that aren't just yes men who can rein in his worst creative impulse, because Drizzit mentioned it on one of his streams recently where he said that Oda's biggest problem is Oda's greatest strength is also his biggest weakness, in which He's extremely creative, but he wants to have his cake and eat it too. So he has all these plot lines. He keeps introducing all these ideas he wants to shove into his story, but he knows he doesn't have enough time. But he doesn't. But he can't bring himself to just abandon it, not put it into the story and kind of, do what needs to be done to tighten up the storytelling to tell the best story possible. So he finds like these odd ways to kind of like cram it in as best as he can, even if it's half finished, just to get it on there, so he can be like, oh, look at how creative I am. And I feel like he needs editors who can kind of rein that in and kind of help him hone his creative vision a little bit better. But honestly, given his reach and influence, odds of that happening slim to none. So it's one of those things where I will call him out for it, but I gotta acknowledge things are probably not gonna change. Yeah, so it is what it is. What can you do? But oh, man, like, cause it didn't hit me until recently. I was like looking back through old tweets and things, and I saw people mentioning that Wano's now over, or it's going to reach 100 chapters, depending on which chapter you claim it starts on. I think 909 was like the first official chapter where they actually get to Wano. But this arc is now as long as Dressrosa was. And it's still nowhere near the end yet. Like, there's still a good, I'd say, at least 30 to 40 chapters left, which means it's going to be the longest arc in the series to date. And it's honestly such a bloated mess. And even if Oda manages to absolutely nail the ending and tie up all the hanging loose ends and threads as perfectly as possible, I don't really think he can save the arc at this point. Like, I think the best we can expect is a somewhat satisfying ending, but honestly, I think on the whole, overall, this is going to end up being, for me personally anyway, one of the more lackluster arcs in the series. And I guess the only question with regards to that is that going to be a portent of things to come? Like, is this going to be a showcase of what the rest of the series is going to look like what we can expect from the climax? Or is it just a bad one-off? I guess we'll have to wait and see, because again, like Oda keeps saying, he's had the ending planned since the beginning. He's always kind of been aiming towards that, so maybe this will be one bad hiccup, but who knows? Alright, with that said, I think I really am super tired. I'm going to have to shut it down here. Try to get some rest. Hope you all enjoyed this video. As always, if you like my videos, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Like I said, don't expect any major read-throughs or things to come back to the channel until at least the second weekend in May. Once we get closer to the day, I'll do a channel update with like proper dates, times, schedules, things like that. But just as an FYI, I suppose. With that said, I've also been kind of like, I haven't been on Twitter. I've been keeping an eye on, the news and everything that's been going on. So if you can, I don't have any links or stuff on me right now. I do apologize, but please do donate to any organizations that are supporting, stopping the hate against Asian Americans. Please do anything you can to help support your Asian American neighbors. If you do see something, please don't just stand there observing it. Things really are dangerous out there. Please stay safe. My love and support to all of you. Until next time, this is Ash. Talk to you all later.